ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपगदामह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुं श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सागना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सागना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपति गोपेशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यः च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 12, Birth of Emperor Parikshit, verse 25. धृत्या बली कृष्णे राधा इव सद्ग्रहा आहर्तैषो अश्वमेधानां वृद्धानां पर्युपासकः। धृत्या बली कृष्णे प्रराद इव सद्ग्रह आहर्तैषो अश्वमेधानां वृद्धानां पर्युपासकः। धृत्या बली कृष्णे प्रराद इव सद्ग्रह आहर्तैषो अश्वमेधानां वृद्धानां पर्युपासकः। धृत्या बली कृष्णे प्रराद इव सद्ग्रह आहर्तैषो अश्वमेधानां वृद्धानां पर्युपासकः। Synonyms: Nritya by patience, Bali Sama like Bali Maharaja, Krishna unto Lord Sri Krishna, Prahlada Maharaja, Iva like Sadgraha, devotee of Aharta, performer, Esha, this child, Ashwamedhanam of Ashwamedha sacrifices, Riddhanam of the old and experienced man, Paryupasaka, follower. Translation: this child will be like Bali Maharaja in patience, a staunch devotee of Lord Krishna like Prahlad Maharaja, a performer of many Ashwamedha horse sacrifices, and a follower of the old and experienced man. So, as seen in the previous verses, uh, these are continued descriptions of uh, these are continued descriptions by the Brahmanas about the future predictions regarding Parishit Maharaj during his birth ceremony. So, in these verses, he is being uh, the glory of Parikshit Maharaj is being compared to various personalities uh, as was described in the previous verses. Similarly, in this verse also, he is being compared to uh, two major personalities like Bali Maharaja and also Prahlada Maharaja, who were both uh, exalted devotees of the Supreme Lord. Purport: Bali Maharaja, one of the 12 authorities in the devotional service of the Lord. Bali Maharaja is a great authority in devotional service because he sacrificed everything to please the Lord and relinquished the connection of his so called spiritual master who obstructed him on the path of risking everything for the service of the Lord. The highest perfection of religious life is to attain to the stage of unqualified devotional service of the Lord without any cause or without being obstructed by any kind of worldly obligation. Bali Maharaja was determined to give up everything for the satisfaction of the Lord, and he did not care for any obstruction whatsoever. He is the grandson of Prahlada Maharaja, another authority in the devotional service of the Lord. Bali Maharaja and the history of his dealings with Vishnu Vamanadeva are described in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 11 to 24. Uh, So Bali Maharaj is famously known for uh, his part in uh, the Vamana Lila, and uh, despite the fact that he came from the demoniac uh, background, just like his grandfather Prahlada Maharaja, though both of them came from the uh, lineage of demons. Still, they are both of them are known to be uh, exalted devotees of the Supreme Lord. And the case of Bali Maharaja is especially very unique in the sense that uh, even when uh, we look at it from the perspective of, uh, in the context of the Navavida Bhakti, so the verse regarding the Navavida Bhakti, it appears in the chapters related to the teachings of Prahlada Maharaja. So in Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.23, Prahlad Maharaj says, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmani Vedanam. So in this verse regarding the Navavida Bhakti, uh, the 9 processes of performing devotional service are described, beginning from Shravanam, hearing, followed by Kirtanam. Uh, Kirtanam could refer to whether it is chanting the japa or performing kirtan, like singing the Harinam, or even speaking Krishna Katha is also regarded as kirtanam. So these two, Shravanam Kirtanam, are the most basic and the uh, easiest methods to perform devotional service. Uh, Apart from that, there are other processes like Smaranam, and the difficulty actually increases from the first process to the last. So uh, compared to uh, compared to processes like Archanam, Shravanam Kirtanam can be easily performed without requiring much paraphernalia compared to Archanam, deity worship. And it is also described that these 9 processes can also be divided into two main categories. 9 can be divided as 7 plus 2. The first 7 processes are described as belonging to the Vidhi Marga, and the remaining 2 processes are described as belonging to the Raga Marga. So, Vidhi Marga refers to bhakti based on following the rules and regulations, and therefore the first 7 methods are regarded as belonging to Vidhi Marga, because these 7 methods can easily be performed by neophytes, especially because they simply have to follow the rules and regulations. But the Raga Marga refers to the processes in which it requires spontaneous love and devotion towards the Supreme Lord, and it is not merely restricted to a set of rules and regulations. And therefore, this uh, Raga Marga Bhakti is described as the kind of devotion which can only be exhibited by the most exalted devotees, like the Brajvasis, for example. But in the case of Bali Maharaja, uh, his devotion towards the Supreme Lord is can also be regarded as that which belongs to the Raga Marga, because he surrendered everything to the Supreme Lord. Uh, though he was occupying the throne of being the ruler, and despite the fact that he was also being obstructed by his own spiritual master to not um, to not fulfill the requests of the Supreme Lord. Still, Bali Maharaja, knowing that um, it was the Supreme Lord who made that request, he was willing to surrender everything to the Supreme Lord, and that is what Atma Nivedanam is all about. So the ninth process, Atma Nivedanam. So it was exhibited by Bali Maharaja. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmanivedanam. So Sakyam Atmanivedanam are regarded as very exalted levels of bhakti belonging to the Raga Marga, and Atmanivedanam is especially exhibited by Bali Maharaja by surrendering everything to the Supreme Lord, despite knowing that he would be ruined. So he was willing to give up everything merely to fulfill the request of the Supreme Lord. So such was the devotion exhibited by Bali Maharaja, and that itself shows how exalted he was as a devotee. So even uh, in the context of Navavida Bhakti, it can be clearly seen that uh, the more challenging processes of bhakti, like uh, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, are not uh, cannot be easily performed by neophytes, and it is not merely restricted to following a set of rules and regulations. Uh, the Raga Marga Bhakti, which covers uh, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, should come spontaneously, and that can only be exhibited by the most exalted devotees like the Brajvasis, and also Bali Maharaja, who who truly exhibited what Atmanivedanam truly means. So when he offered everything that he had in his possession, and Vamanadeva uh, covered everything in just two steps, and when the third step was placed on the head of Bali Maharaja, he was sent to the subterranean region in the Sutala planet. So this Sutala planet is one of the seven subterranean planets, part of the 14 planetary systems. So there are six upper planetary systems, and followed by the seventh middle planetary system, the Bhumandal, and below the Bhumandal, or beneath the Bhumandal in the subterranean region, is uh, the seven other subterranean planets, also known as the lower planetary systems. So the Sutala planet is the fourth subterranean planet in these seven planetary systems. Though Bali Maharaja was sent to the Sutala planet, still that was also a blessing by the Supreme Lord, because uh, even in these subterranean planets, there is a lot of material opulence to be enjoyed by the residents of those uh, lower planets. Um, just like the Swargaloka in the upper planetary system, uh, there are three types of Swargas. The Divya Swarga is the Swargaloka in the upper planetary system. There's also the Bhavan Swarga, which is actually part of the Bhumandal. And the third type of Swarga is actually Bila Swarga. Bila Swarga refers to the heavenly region, which is part of the subterranean planetary systems. And Bali Maharaja was sent to rule the Sutla planet, which was full of material opulence. So, though he gave up everything uh, to fulfill the request of the Supreme Lord reciprocated by making him the chief of the Sutla planet, and uh, Bali Maharaja was able to enjoy material opulence in the Sutla planet. Uh, it is also stated that he would he would be occupying the position of the next Indra in the Divya Swarga after the end of uh, the current Indra's reign. Bali Maharaja uh, would depart from the Sutla planet and occupy the position of Indra in the Divya Surga. So, uh, such an exalted devotee like Bali Maharaja, though uh, he uh, he was not concerned about losing his material opulence, uh, he wanted to fulfill the request of the Supreme Lord, and therefore the Supreme Lord also reciprocated by offering him so much material opulence, not just in the Sutla planet, but he will also be occupying the position of Indra in the Divya Surga. And it is also stated in this paragraph about, uh, it is also stated that the highest perfection of religious life is to attain to the stage of unqualified devotional service of the Lord without any cause or without being obstructed by any kind of worldly obligation. So there's also a verse from chapter 2 of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the two keywords here are uh, attaining to devotional service without any cause or without being obstructed by any kind of worldly obligation. So it is also stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1 1.2.6, Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Adoksaji Ahaitu ki Apratiyata Yayatma Suprasidati. Translation: the supreme occupation, dharma for all humanity, is that by which man can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So the two important keywords in this verse: ahituki apratiyata, ahituki causeless, apratiyata unbroken. So pure devotional service should be ahituki and apratyata. It should be causeless and unbroken, meaning it should be unmotivated and uninterrupted. So pure devotional service uh, should be devoid of any material desires, and it should also be uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self, because the Supreme Lord Himself says in the Bhagavad Gita 15.7, Mamaivamso Jivaloke Jivabhuta Sanatana Manashashtaindriyani Prakrishtani Karshati. So in that verse, the Supreme Lord says that all the living entities are His eternal fragmental parts. So when living entities are uh, involved in performing devotional service, uh, we can satisfy the Supreme Lord. And since we as the living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, we can only attain satisfaction when the Supreme Lord is satisfied. So, as mentioned in this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.6, the supreme occupation, dharma for all humanity, is that by which man can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So it is stated that the supreme occupation of dharma for all humanity is loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. And such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. This simply means that uh, the living entities, especially those who have taken birth in the form of human beings, can only attain satisfaction through unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Uh, it is also stated here that it is the supreme occupation or dharma for all humanity. Savai Pumsam, meaning for mankind. It is also an important point to be noted here because all the conditioned souls are uh, always transmigrating between the 84 lakh uh, material bodies. So the 84 lakh species of material bodies uh, consists of जलजा नवलक्षाणि स्थावरं लक्षविंशति कृमियो रुद्रसंख्याः पक्षिणां दशलक्षणं त्रिंशलक्षाणि पशवः चतुर्लक्षाणि मानुषः जलजा नवलक्षाणि 9 lakh aquatics स्थावरं लक्षविंशति 20 lakh uh, trees and non-moving entities कृमियो रुद्रसंख्याः 11 lakh germs and insects पक्षिणां दशलक्षणं birds 10 lakh त्रिंशलक्षाणि पशवः 30 lakh quadrupeds or four-legged animals, Chatur Lakshani Manushaha, 4 lakh human beings. So, out of the 84 lakh species of material bodies, uh, the conditioned souls keep transmigrating from one material body to another according to their previous karmas, and this is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, about how the even in 15.7 the Supreme Lord says that though all the living entities are uh, his eternal fragmental parts, uh, the Supreme Lord also says that the conditioned souls are always struggling uh, due to um, due to identifying the self with the material senses. And in the following few verses, the Supreme Lord also explains about how the soul carries the conception uh, from the past life, and it is based on the activities from the past life that we get the newer bodies from these 84 lakh material bodies. So it is all based on the kind of activities which the conditioned living entities perform that they get different material bodies. So something similar has also been mentioned by the Supreme Lord in Gita 8.6. Yam yamapi smaran bhavan charyante kalaveram tam tamaiti kaunteya sadatat bhava bhavita. So in that verse, the Supreme Lord says that uh, the the kind of remembrance uh, which someone has at the time of death, so that form will be taken by such by that person in his next life. So it is all uh, it is all based on our own karmas in the current life that we get our future body, whether it is another material body from the 84 lakh species of material bodies, or whether we regain our original transcendental body. So the fact that now we have been uh, we have been born in this uh, precious human form of life shows that we have been performing karmas that have been favorable to enable us to take birth in this precious human form of life, and uh, the exaltedness of this human form of life has also been uh, emphasized by Lord Brahma and the demigods in Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3. It is because the human beings who are born in the Bhumandal have the privilege of performing devotional service to be liberated and to be elevated to the spiritual world. Uh, the demigods and Lord Brahma himself, they belong to the upper planetary systems, and though they occupy the upper region, still the human beings are seen as being in a more advantageous position, even by the demigods. So uh, it is mentioned in this verse that the supreme occupation or dharma for all humanity is loving devotional service to the transcendental Lord, and therefore dharma cannot be equated to religion, which is sectarian. Dharma is universal and it applies to all of humanity, and it is all about performing devotional service to satisfy the Supreme Lord. And as mentioned earlier, since the conditioned souls are also part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, uh, we can only satisfy ourselves uh, when we perform devotional service to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Only when the supreme whole is satisfied, then the parts can be satisfied. So this also indicates that conditioned souls, no matter how much they uh, they go after material sense gratification, they can never satisfy themselves, because the self means the soul, and the origin of the soul is the Supreme Lord Himself. So only by satisfying the Supreme Lord we can satisfy ourself, meaning our soul. Mere material sense gratification will not provide um, permanent happiness, and it is only like adding fuel to the fire. Mm, Another personality mentioned uh, in the in this verse 1.12.25 is Prahlada Maharaja. So Prahlada Maharaja is uh, the grandfather of Bali Maharaja. Prahlada Maharaja, a perfect devotee of Lord Krishna, Vishnu, his father Hiranyakashipu chastised him severely when he was only 5 years old for his becoming an unalloyed devotee of the Lord. He was the first son of Hiranyakashipu, and his mother's name was Kayadu. Prahlada Maharaja was an authority in the devotional service of the Lord because he had his father killed by Lord Narasimha, setting the example that even a father should be removed from the path of devotional service if such a father happens to be an obstacle. He had four sons, and the eldest son, Virosana, is the father of Bali Maharaja, mentioned above. The history of Prahlada Maharaja's activities is described in the seventh canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Mm. Prahlada Maharaja, the grandfather of Bali Maharaja, is also another example of uh, a great exalted devotee of the Supreme Lord, and he is also an example about uh, an example of how one should perform devotional service in an unmotivated and uninterrupted way. Uh, the case of Prahlad Maharaja is also very similar to many many other exalted uh, devotees. Even in the case of the Pandavas, they always remain devotees of the Supreme Lord, regardless of the fact that they were facing so many difficulties in life. Uh, Compared to the Pandavas, it it was even worse in the case of Prahlada Maharaja, because uh, he was being chastised by his own father, and many uh, many attempts also being made to kill him. But in all such instances, he always remained as an unalloyed devotee of the Supreme Lord. And In every such instance, the Supreme Lord also reciprocated by saving him from all those difficulties. And uh, and since the father of Prahlad Maharaja uh, went to the extent of uh, harming him even further, then he was slain by Narasimhadeva. So it can be clearly seen from the life of all these exalted devotees, whether it's Prahlada Maharaja or even the Pandavas, that uh, the life of all these devotees are not were not always um, full of happiness, but they had to face so many difficulties, despite the fact that they were all exalted devotees. But today we are uh, we are studying about them mainly because they remain as unalloyed devotees of the Supreme Lord, regardless of the kind of difficulties which they had to face. So, uh, just because someone faces, uh, just because some neophyte devotee faces difficulties or setbacks in his material life, he should not give up bhakti, because it can be clearly seen from the examples of these exalted devotees like Prahlad Maharaja and also the Pandavas, that even for them, life was not always full of happiness. Even they had to suffer so much. But the main example which they set is that they were always surrendered to the Supreme Lord. So they followed the instruction of the Supreme Lord, uh, especially the instruction from the Gita in 18.66. Sarvadharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Raja Aham Tam Sarvapapibhyo Mokshaishami Mascha. So the Supreme Lord Himself says in the Gita that the devotees should be fully surrendered to Him and not worry about anything. That's what the Supreme Lord says in the Gita, in that verse, especially in the part where He says, Ma Suchaha, do not worry. So, uh, from Srimad Bhagavatam, though Srimad Bhagavatam is also known as the Bhagavata Purana or the Purana of Bhagavan, it is not merely about Bhagavan alone, because the pastimes of Bhagavan uh, are, are never, the pastimes of Bhagavan are always full of his loving interactions with the Bhagavatas. So the Bhagavata Purana also talks about the Maha Bhagavatas or exalted devotees like Prahlada Maharaja and also the Pandavas and many other devotees. So in all the different avatars of the Supreme Lord, we can see so many exalted devotees uh, interacting with the Supreme Lord, and they always remain unalloyed devotees of the Supreme Lord, regardless of the kind of difficulties which they had to face in life. So that is that is what is meant by ahituki apratiyata, devotional service which is uh, unmotivated and uninterrupted. Especially in the case of Prahlad Maharaja, he was he always remained an unalloyed devotee of the Lord, regardless of so many attempts, uh, regardless of the many attempts that were made to kill him. So he was always surrendered to the Supreme Lord, and the Supreme Lord also reciprocated by saving him in every instance when attempts were made to kill him. The Supreme Lord always saved him, and finally, um, the Supreme Lord also completely removed the obstacle, uh, the single biggest obstacle before Prahlad Maharaja. that was Hiranyakashipu. So it was only due to the firm resolve and determination of Prahlada Maharaja. Um, he was completely absorbed in bhakti, and therefore the Supreme Lord also reciprocated by saving him in all those difficulties. And finally, the Supreme Lord removed the biggest obstacle, uh, of Prahlad Maharaja by slaying Hiranyakashipu. So this was possible only due to the unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service of Prahlad Maharaja. So, for neophyte devotees who might think that bhakti is not uh, bringing immediate results, or uh, even if they think that uh, they are not uh, they are not progressing in their material life even after taking up bhakti. So, first of all, the most important thing to be understood here is that bhakti is meant to liberate us from the material miseries uh, of this material world, because the Supreme Lord Himself clearly says in the Gita 8.15 that this material world is Dukkalaya Ashashvatam. So, um, the proper mindset in which one should take up bhakti is to completely liberate oneself from this ocean of material miseries, and not to uh, merely prosper in this temporary material life. No matter how much material wealth we accumulate in this Dukalayam, everything is temporary and everything will be uh, annihilated. But only our spiritual wealth will help us to uh, solve our problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi since time immemorial. So, in relation to this, the Supreme Lord has also spoken verse 7.16 in the Gita about the four types of people who surrender to him. Chaturvida bhajante mam, jana sukirtana arjuna, arto jignasu altati, jnani cha bharatarshava. So there are four types of people who surrender to the Supreme Lord. The one who is seeking material wealth, the one who is in distress, the one who is inquisitive, and the jnani. So uh, this was spoken by the Supreme Lord in Gita 7.16. Then, in the following verses, he further explains about how uh, he regards all these four types of people um, as Mahatmas, but the topmost devotee is the Jnani, who knows that the uh, the main goal of devotional service is to liberate oneself from material bondage. So, compared to the one who is seeking material wealth, or the one who is seeking relief from distress, so uh, for such devotees, though uh, though they are willing to surrender to the Supreme Lord, at least to gain material wealth or to get relief from distress, uh, still they do not understand the fact that the main goal of performing devotional service should be to liberate oneself uh, from all sorts of material entanglement. So, merely seeking material wealth will not solve our real problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi since time immemorial. So, no matter how much wealth we accumulate in this uh, present form of life, uh, once we once we leave this body, and if we are forced to take up another material body in the 84 lakh species of material bodies, then we are going to suffer the same cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi. So, the only solution to this problem will be to liberate ourselves to the spiritual world, and that is only possible if we take up bhakti with the proper mindset, not merely to accumulate material wealth, but to regain our association with the Supreme Lord in the spiritual world. So, whether it is in the case of Prahlada Maharaja or in the case of the Pandavas, they always remain unalloyed devotees of the Supreme Lord, regardless of whether they were experiencing happiness or distress. In in either case, they were always surrendered to the Supreme Lord, and they always regarded themselves as subservient to the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord helped the Pandavas and uh, installed Maharaj Yudhishthira as the ruler of Hastinapura because the Pandavas always regarded themselves as subservient to the Supreme Lord, and therefore the rulers from the Pandava dynasty, they always rule as representatives of the Supreme Lord, compared to demons like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, who thought that they could actually replace the Supreme Lord. So such adharmic creatures, they got what they deserve, and by reading these pastimes, we can clearly understand that true devotional service is all about uh, is all about satisfying the Supreme Lord, because only then we can satisfy ourselves. So, self here means it refers to our soul, and only when the Supreme Lord is satisfied, only then all his eternal fragmental parts, the conditioned souls, can be satisfied. Um, the next verse, verse 26. Rajarishinam Janayita Shasta Chotpata Gaminam Nigrahita Kalailesha Bhuvo Dharmasya Karanat. Translation: This child will be the father of kings who will be like sages for world peace and for the sake of religion. He will be the chastiser of the upstarts and the quarrelsome. Purport: The wisest man in the world is a devotee of the Lord. The sages are called wise men, and there are different types of wise men for different branches of knowledge. Unless, therefore, the king or the head of the state is the wisest man, he cannot control all types of wise men in the state. In the line of royal succession, in the family of Maharaja Yudhishthira, all the kings, without exception, were the wisest men of their times. And so also it is foretold about Maharaja Parikshit and his son Maharaja Janamejaya, who was yet to be born. Such wise kings can become chastisers of upstarts and uprooters of Kali or quarrelsome elements. So Maharaj Parikshit ruled until the dawn of Kali Yuga, and Kali Yuga is regarded uh, as the most fallen yuga, and it can be clearly seen that these glorious rulers were ruling in the previous yugas, and today in the so-called democratic setup, it though it is often described as the the system by the people for the people, um, of the people, so it is actually a system which is by the Shudras, of the Shudras, for the Shudras. So that is why through this so-called democratic setup, people get the kind of governments which they deserve. So the kind of rulers who are elected by this so-called democratic setup, they they clearly they are clear mirror images of the kind of voters who voted for them. So such is the fallen condition in this Kali Yuga. But glorious rulers like Maharaja Yudhishthira, Maharaja Parikshit, and also Maharaj Janamejaya, since they were all exalted devotees, they always regarded themselves as representatives of the Supreme Lord, and they were humble enough to regard themselves as subservient to the Supreme Lord, and therefore they were also blessed by the Supreme Lord to rule as glorious kings. As will be clear in the chapters ahead, Maharaja Parikshit wanted to kill the personified Kali who was attempting to kill a cow, the emblem of peace and religion. The symptoms of Kali are wine, women, gambling, and slaughterhouses. Wise rulers of all states should take lessons from Maharaja Parikshit in how to maintain peace and morality by subduing the upstarts and quarrelsome people who indulge in wine, illicit connection with women, gambling, and meat eating supplied by regularly maintained slaughterhouses. In this age of Kali, regular license is issued for maintaining all of these different departments of quarrel. So how can they expect peace and morality in the state? A very good example of this is in the state of Tamil Nadu. It is not like uh, all the other states in India are not selling liquor, but the state of Tamil Nadu is a very special case because the so-called Tamil governments who claim to be worshipping Tiruvalluvar, they often claim that they are staunch followers of Tiruvalluvar, but uh, they do not know that uh, there is one whole chapter in Tirukural titled Kallunnamai, in which Tiruvalluvar talks about prohibition of liquor. Uh, in other words, he's actually talking about no intoxication. So there are many other chapters in Tirukural which are in parallel to the four regulative principles, like no meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, um, no meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, and uh, uh, no gambling, no illicit sex, and no intoxication. So in Kallunnamai, uh, in this chapter from Tirukural, it is about no intoxication. Uh, so there's also another chapter from Tirukural, chapter 26, in which Tirukural talks about no meat eating. So that chapter is titled Pulal Martal. So that is related to no meat eating. So uh, like this, there are so many similarities between uh, the pillars of bhakti and also the Tirukural. But the so-called Tamil governments, which have been ruling Tamil Nadu, they maintain slaughterhouses and also they also sell liquor to raise revenue to run the government. And yet, they fool the people by saying that they are staunch followers of Tiruvalur. But of course, since we are living in the age of Kali, so it is the so-called democratic system is actually a system by the Shudras, of the Shudras, and for the Shudras. In this age of Kali, regular license is issued for maintaining all of these different departments of quarrel. So how can they expect peace and morality in the state? The state fathers therefore must follow the principles of becoming wiser by devotion to the Lord, by chastising the breaker of discipline, and by uprooting the symptoms of quarrel as mentioned above. If we want blazing fire, we must use dry fuel. Blazing fire and moist fuel go ill together. Peace and morality can prosper only by the principles of Maharaja Parikshit and his followers. So, in the previous verse, Maharaja Parikshit was being compared to two important personalities. two exalted devotees of the Supreme Lord, Bali Maharaja and Prahlada Maharaja. And in this verse 26, uh, they stated that this child will be the father of kings who will be like sages. For world peace and for the sake of religion, he will be the chastiser of the upstarts and the quarrelsome. So there's also further description about how Maharaja Parikshit actually prevented the uh, the personification of Kali from entering into his territory. So until the reign of Maharaja Parikshit, Kali Yuga could not fully manifest. The personification of Kali could not fully manifest himself fully. So, with the presence of such glorious rulers like Maharaja Parikshit, since uh, from from the time of his birth, even before his birth, it was proven that he was such an exalted devotee of the Supreme Lord, uh, as he's uh, as he is also described as Vishnu Ratha, the one who was protected by Lord Vishnu when even when he was in the womb of his mother. So Maharaja Parikshit was such an exalted devotee of the Supreme Lord, and he was destined to be a glorious ruler who was even more glorious than his predecessors. So, in this verse also, there are further descriptions about uh, uh, which describe the predictions about how Maharaja Parikshit would rule as a glorious ruler in the future. So the next verse is verse 27. Uh, this will be discussed in the next session. Mm, that's all for today. Hare Krishna.